Hello, hi everyone. I'm Ernesto, ready to start this second episode with our toolkit from Bloom and start coding some things together. So, welcome again. We're going to focus today on certain first steps to set up our Bloom environment. So you remember in the last time we were online, we were talking about questionnaires, and we were talking about a quick way in which you can edit with our tools one of these questionnaires, and you will be able to see right away what's happening on a browser. And the idea today is to extend this concept. Before, we were dealing with a web editor that was very fast to produce these quizzes, these questionnaires, but now we want to have the whole flexibility of the toolkit. So the idea is, in the next episodes, we're going to be having more and more examples and start explaining what is this thing Bloom that we got here in Yeira, how do we use this, and how do we increase our content throughput for our learning platforms. So before I open or start sharing my screen, I just want to talk a little bit about authoring tools. So we saw the e-learning iceberg, as I call it, which means the platform itself is just the tip of the iceberg, and then you have a bunch of tasks, budgets, activities, resources, people that goes below the sea level, and you need to take that investment, you need to take that effort to actually produce an e-learning course. So among those tools, you have what is called an authoring tool. Authoring tools are basically applications. Usually they are standalone applications that you run, you pay for a license, and you install on your personal computer set of tools where you can design different types of interactive contents, change layout, change the colors, customize in a way. So the simplest way of thinking about an authoring tool is just go back to our slides or PowerPoint presentation. Actually, those are authoring tools as well. Many times we use them to produce PDF documents with a certain design, just by printing that into PDF. And there's lots of tools now that are starting to work on web environments. You don't even need to download anything. You just open an account somewhere. Like the case of Prezi, for instance, to mention just one. You start working with their tools online, and then you can share or embed the results of that authoring tool, the content. So there's a range of these tools, and they will vary principally on an axis that has on one of the extremes the speed of use, and on the other side, the robustness or the amount of features this tool will have. So in the total extreme opposite to this very quick authoring tools, you will have HTML or JavaScript coding. So all of the things that you can put on a learning platform are actually web pages that can have behind that styling and behavior or coding. So on that side, the problem is that you will lose most of the intuition. So where you may have a tool where you will dragging and dropping blocks and configuring and typing directly the text, on this end you'll need to deal with a development interface. So what Bloom is something in the middle, because we think that both worlds, the authoring, intuitive authoring tools, I'm going to call them like that, and the vanilla code, or let's say HTML, JavaScript world, both have advantages. And what I wanted to do with Bloom is to have, a balance between both, and it comes out of experiences that we had. The main problem that we faced with both systems in general, but with authoring tools, the problem is that we have our source code living behind a license, and that means if we want to do some very quick changes, we need to go back to that source code on that tool and do the changes, and then export that as HTML, and eventually repack that as a SCORM package or some other type of format, upload that to the platform. And with Bloom, what we're trying to do, we're trying to avoid all that process and have something that is an intermediate source code. It's almost like a language in itself that is not a compiled language, it's a kind of interpreted language. So that's where we're going to be working. We're going to be working with this interpreted language. In our past example, what we had is you had your questionnaire, and then you had some piece of code somewhere below where you had some extra details of that layout and the behavior. So that's our intermediate language for Bloom. Working in that way means that we don't need to go back to the source code or the original layout, so we can do changes there on the fly, and we can see them right away. So after I explain a bit of this, let me now switch my screen. I just need to show you another page. And we just opened a GitHub repository where we're going to be running some of these examples. So let's switch now to my screen. I can stay here next to my screencast. And you will find this repository. It's a public repository called YeiraLab. The link is going to be posted everywhere. But you can look at my account, Riestra-YeiraLab. And then you will find some very simple files. There's a README here explaining how do we start with all this. And I'm going to be posting all of the examples every session on this site. So you can download them, follow them, and change them if you want. So it is important to mention that although you are going to be able to run on a local computer your examples, all of them will run on the Yeira platform. If you don't have one, just visit our webpage, and it's free. You can just open an account for free. And if you need some help, you can send us an email to our support email, soporte@yeira.training. Soporte@yeira.training. So here is a set of instructions that we're going to outline just slightly, but I'm going to show you what's the end result of following all these steps. So basically, first, you need to get a code editor. You can use Visual Studio Code, Atom, Sublime, or you prefer Notepad. Then, as a second step, this is recommendable. You don't need to do that, but I would recommend to follow these steps. You can also run a local server in some other way, but I would suggest, if you don't have it installed, I would suggest to install Node.js. We're not going to be programming, we're just going to be using some tools on Node.js so that we can have your site refreshing when you change your code. So you install Node on your computer, and then the tool that I think is a fantastic companion to what we want to do is browser sync. Here's the link, and this is the command that you need to run to install it. Then once you have a copy of your source code from YeiraLab, you can just download the code, unzip it, and work on that folder. Or if you have Git running on your machine, then you can sync to the repository. And then you're just going to launch this command. So I know that this all sounds technical. If you need any help, just by all means contact me. I will be glad to help you. But it's very simple. You just need to do this once. And it's pretty straightforward. It's not going to be a problem, I assure you that. So let's see then how does that look. I have my code editor here. And you see that I have a copy of this same repository. You see here we have a structure of folders that will have just these three files here. There's a YeiraLab folder, and then a Toolkit folder, and you have just three files. One of them is an index, HTML, and the other two are YAML files. So that's exactly what I have here downloaded. So I can show you now my Toolkit is here, and I have some folders here, an assets folder, and I have my config, index, and pages. Let me just explain quickly. The index is the entry point to all of the libraries and the functions that you will be calling into your own Bloom interactive. So these are all pointed to our servers. We're frequently updating these repositories or these contents so that you can have the latest on your toolkit. And then this is the last time we're going to be seeing HTML, in particular in this horrible format here that's full of things that maybe are not that intuitive. We're only going to be working with these two files. This first file is a config file. Probably we don't need to touch it a lot. And mainly we're going to be working on this pages file. So Bloom is based on two pillars, I would say. And I'm going to talk a bit of the origin. So I already mentioned that we wanted to have an interpreted language. We didn't want to compile every time we wanted to do upgrades. Instead, we wanted to have intermediate source code that we could change on the fly because of the requirements that we were receiving from customers or clients who wanted to have very fast, very quick changes on their contents. So that's one of the origins. And at some point, we selected responsive tools. We started working with Vue.js, which is an amazing framework for doing reactive applications. And we were having the problem that we had to go back to the source again on Vue, on JavaScript files, to change certain things, texts just like this. You see here, there's a hello world little text here. And if you don't see that, let me just, let's just try to increase my, let's see if it's, where is it? I always hit the shortcut somewhere here. There it is. So you see that there are some text elements here, like this simple hello world is marked in orange almost color. So instead of instead of going to your source code, your HTML, and changing this text, what we wanted is to have a file where all changeable texts and eventually assets could be changed, and then from that point they would go back to the interactive file. So we started on that path. First, it was very basic. We were just working with text, but eventually it turned out to be a more complex system. So one of the first models that we had was working with a more, more on the programmer side of things code, which was or language, which is JSON, and JSON is full of curly braces and syntax. And then we shifted over to YAML. YAML is a very simple language for configuring. It's used mainly for documenting simple configurations. And what you see here is a structure, a very basic structure, and I'm going to explain that a little bit. A Bloom file will have, or a Bloom pages file will have a page as the main entry point, and then you can have many pages, which will behave as you can expect. It's almost like a book. And each page will have a category and an ID. And these are very general concepts. A category is something that will classify your pages and could be a way of organizing your content. And an ID is going to be a unique identifier of that page. So as long as you have that in mind, this is the only thing that will be very specific to Bloom. The rest of the elements that you will find here are coming from another world, and that is Bulma. I'm going to open a page now and show you what is this thing, Bulma. Basically, this is a CSS framework. Hold on a second. I'm just going to move my screen over to here, just to show you this as a reference. So, what is this? What is a CSS framework? It is a set of functions or a set of classes that will define. I have here a visitor. Will define the way in which your page is going to look. So the origin of styles comes from cascaded style sheets, which is kind of the building block for all these frameworks. And the problem with CSS is that it is complex. Sometimes it tends to be repetitive, and it's not easy to maintain. So all of these frameworks are coming to help you with a set of, let's say, blocks or components that will let you produce in a simpler way your stylings. So if you want to style your Bloom content, in a very custom way, you need to come to this page and learn a bit more about Bulma. In the documentation, you will find a lot of examples where you can change different things, colors, you can have layouts, complex layouts. And the beautiful thing about Bulma and other CSS frameworks is that it is responsive from the start. So everything that we're doing now with Bloom is responsive. It will work on your mobile phone just because we're using this library. So we don't need now to take in consideration different sets or different pages if you're displaying on a mobile phone vertically, or you want to use a tablet or a wide display. All of this is taken care of by this library. So naturally, some of the things you're going to be seeing on this side relates to Bulma. So for instance, if you see this tag called content, it is actually a content block from Bulma, and then you can change it accordingly. We'll see that in a moment. Then we have also a box here. A box is a component as well as a rectangle that has certain margins and has a certain layout. And in this case, you have here a modifier that's this is shadowless, which means we don't want to project shadow. So in this case, Bloom is taking the advantage of running on Bulma, and then you can pass those classes here into your structure. So you see inside of this content, we have a box, and that's why we have these tabs here. I can change it with the tab key, the hierarchy of my structure. And inside this box, we have then this element that's called text. So let's get back now to our process. Let's see, we were talking about our repository. And I'm going to just take this README here right from my editor. So at some point, we install this tool, browser sync. And then from your folder here, you need to open a terminal here. This can be done in many different ways, but in our case, we're going to right-click on index on our toolkit folder. I'm already there, but I'm going to, no, I'm not there actually. So I need to open a terminal, and then I'll have now a console terminal here, and I can start typing commands. And the only command I need to type at this point is this browser sync start. We're going to start a server, and we're going to be updating this output or the web view of this server, depending on changes on YAML files. That's what this all means. And a warning here: if you try to run your index from your file system, what does that mean? It means that I open this on my Finder, in this case in Mac, and I just click on that so that it opens on Chrome or in my preferred browser. It's not going to work. It doesn't work because it needs to actually have a server that does the communication with the tools that we're having here. So it's important that you follow this in a way, or just run your own local server. There's plenty of examples, and I can share more. But this is the preferred one. So as soon as I do this, I'll have a browser popping into my view here. You see now certain links came here out, and now I see here there's a tab. This is running on Firefox, and I'm just going to squeeze a bit of my code editor on this side. I don't need this probably, but I already have my pages here, and then you see the hello world comes out here right away. So let's just change this phrase for something. We are doing a change on our source. And then I'm going to hit save. It could be command save in my case, or just go to the menu and save. And then you'll see that this changes immediately. We already told that we're running on YAML, and we're running with this Bulma framework. Bloom is an interpreted language, so that means our source code is this. We don't resort to any other binary files or anything else. We collect our engine from our repository at Yeira, but that's the only thing you need. And basically, the process for working with your content is going to be going back and forth here from your code interface to your screen and back. So I'm going to just remove this shadow. Let's see what happens. If I save this, I'll have a box with a shadow. You see that it's very subtle here. But I can do some other things. Maybe I can use a Bulma class that's, let's see if this works. Has background info. If I do that, I expect to have a color here. Let's see if it works. It didn't work. Background, sorry for that. It's a typo. And then I have a blue background now. I'm using the classes that I have right off Bulma into my my source here. And I think, well, probably at this point, we've covered a lot of things. And eventually, we're going to be dealing with more and more examples. At this moment, I'm just dealing with presentation type of content or expositive contents. You remember in the last session, we had a quiz. So we'll get back to that. We'll get back to learning analytics and all that stuff. But we're going to spend a few episodes talking about the presentation tools that we have here. And maybe we're going to be structuring different things. If we can move faster, then we'll see. For the moment, I just want to show you a couple of elements. So I'm going to change or add here inside of my box. I want to add a title. I'm going to put on this title. This is my nice title. So let me just remove that blue box. It's not that beautiful. And then you see that if I use this tag title, it's almost like you're putting your text, but you give some context. It's almost like you're giving them a definition. That's actually the class concept from styling your web pages. Style sheets actually produce these classes, and everything can take from that class its attributes, its size, its color, and so on. So along with title, we also have subtitle. And here is subtitle. And it just has the hierarchy of sizes. You see, it's in Bulma it does something beautiful, which is it recognizes that a title was before, and therefore it places it as slightly closer to a title. So it produces a whole unit visually. And then you have the paragraph. So we can try some other things maybe. I don't remember how do I put text to the left. Let's see if I look into my documentation. Well, let's do something else. Right below text, I'm going to open a new element here. I'm going to call this style. So what is a style? Style is actually CSS, and I can use here my standard CSS components. So if I do text align, then I put right. This is almost like working with a WYSIWYG interface where you just put your inline styles. So what I expect is that this paragraph is going to move to the right. There it is. And let me just try this. If I just, instead of putting this style align with the text, or let's do something different totally. Let's put here background color or a color. So let's say this is going to be, what could it be? Well, let me just do this and see if it works. If I move my style up, you see that what happened is that now my style is taking the hierarchy of the box. So instead of having to paste or copy that piece of style and moving that through my HTML, the only thing I'm doing is I'm removing or adding tabs. And that's the structure in which this works is you need to put your elements inside, and then at the bottom, you need to style them. So this means this is a style for the text. So only the text is going to align right. But if I move it up to the box, then you see that takes all of the components or the children of that box and applies that style. So this is a beautiful feature. It's a powerful feature because you just write once your style, and then you can, if you're changing the hierarchy, you just need to use the tabs. You don't need to copy that code and move it over to somewhere. So this gives you some speed for producing your content and styling them. So we're we just have a few minutes left. I think we just covered what I wanted to see on this occasion. We're going to see more and more examples upcoming. So in the next episode, we're going to be talking about more complex layouts. Basically, we want to see what happens now with columns and with layouts. And when you change those, let's just see what happens if I squeeze my screen here. Well, nothing happens because this is already a single row. So it will look the same on a mobile phone. Then it will look on my desktop. But you see that everything that comes into the structure, it can be reorganized, and we can do very complex layouts. So next session, we're going to be dealing with these columns and the responsive design of these columns. We're going to be talking about these grids, the concept of a grid on a web page, splitting in 12 columns, and how do I assign content to a segment of those columns, so the first 6 columns, let's say, and then the other 6 for another object, and so on. So, well, thanks again for attending. I think I still would like to show you a couple of messages here, just because I have them at hand. Let's just display this beautiful banner. Just to remind you that you can open your account at Yeira.training. It's free to have your own platform, and you can send us an email to hola@Yeira.training. If you want to have the toolkit, you can just head to the Github Repository, but it would be best if you have also an account so that you can follow the examples and then upload that as content into your Yeira platform. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed as much as I did this session. Now it's properly turning into a live coding event. And yeah, I think for this time it's just enough. As usual, I take a sip of my preferred drink here. It's becoming a tradition now, and I'll say goodbye until next episode. Thank you. See you. Bye.